Hello everyone, it's time to Nephis and Chill, and in this video today I am going to be showing an amazing burst Magicka Templar DPS build for PvE made by Slaymane, who is one of our at Sona's Academy ESO professors and a really good Magplar DPS player in endgame. As always, if you like and want to see more ESO content from me, please do subscribe to the channel as it helps me out quite a bit. Now, Slaymane has named this build the Archplar, which is very apt as he specifically made this Magplar build to tackle on the third boss of veteran Halls of Fabrication, the Archcustodian, which as some of you may know requires a lot of group DPS in a short amount of time. Thus, this build is very heavily focused on a tremendous amount of burst damage in a short amount of time. Now, this build can not only just be applied to the Archcustodian fight or several other trial scenarios, but also 4-man content in general, as a lot of boss fights in dungeons tend to not last very long depending on your group DPS, and even the harder ones usually may not last longer than several minutes at most. Plus, killing trash in dungeons is important as well, and the Archplar build just melts them. I'll be showing the rotation and a brief showcase of one of the dungeons I sort of played around in towards the end of the video, but I'll explain the build, skill bars, and rotation as well. First off, we're going to actually look at the character sheet. It is a Breton. Now, you can be a Breton or a High Elf, but I would totally recommend a Breton for the the Dragonhold patch. Sustain is pretty rough on Magicka Templar. Magicka Templar is not dead. The sustain is definitely terrible, but manageable. And in terms of attribute points, we have 64 points in the max Magicka, and we end up with 38 or so max Magicka, 18k health, and 11k stamina or so. Spell damage is about 2.2k unbuffed, and resistances are whatever. In terms of the Mundus Stone, the Shadow is going to be key here, especially with our build, but in general, the Shadow is going to be a DPS Mundus, the primary DPS Mundus Stone for Dragonhold DLC. And we do have a Bystat food. You can switch it up between Bystat food and Clockwork Citrus. With Clockwork Citrus, you may need to put a health enchantment on your one of your big pieces, and you should be fine for most content. And we're going to go back to the Bystat food here real quick just to show you the full potential of it. And that's pretty much it for the character sheet. 2-piece Balorg is going to be essential for this build because Balorg will provide a great amount of spell damage for your Archplar build upon the usage of your ultimate ability. And a lot of people don't seem to understand how this works. So basically, when you use an ultimate ability, you gain weapon and spell damage for 10 seconds, equal to twice the amount of the ultimate you use. So if I use a meteor, which costs 190 ultimate for me, I'll get 380 weapon and spell damage for 10 seconds because it's double the amount. Obviously, sometimes depending on the ult you're using or depending on what's going on, like mechanics, you may store up a bit more ultimate than what's displayed on the tooltip of your ultimate. For those of you who don't know, you can store up to 500 ultimate on your character, and that also plays into Balorg. And we do have 2 more sets we need to talk about here. But before that, there are 3 alternatives I would like to show you guys to Balorg. Now, Zahn is also a great amount of burst damage in a short amount of time. If you don't have Balorg, you can use Zahn. And if you don't have Combat Prayer or Source of Minor Berserk from a healer or something, you can use Slime Crawl as well. But ideally, you want to go with Balorg or Zahn. Grothar is also a pretty nice choice, especially for dungeon packs and certain boss fights. So these 3 sets are pretty great alternatives to the Balorg, but preferably you want the Balorg with the Archplar build. And here we have Master Architect. Now we want Master Architect to be double barred, meaning it should be active on both bars. So in fact, we have 3 Master Architect jewelry, and we have 2-piece Master Architect on the body, which completes the 5-piece. And Master Architect is going to provide us with Major Slayer every time we use an ultimate. Now you may be asking me, Nephis, why would I use Balorg and Master Architect? One set encourages storing up ultimate and using expensive ultimates, while the other set encourages using low-cost ultimates to keep up a greater uptime of Major Slayer. In this case, for the Archplar build, it doesn't really, you win either way. So if you're storing up ultimate for a huge boss fight or something that you need to melt down quick, you win with Baylord. And you still get Major Slayer from Master Architect for 10 seconds. And this lines up, really, the Major Slayer duration with Baylord's 10-second duration. Now, what about when you need to use, low-cost ultimates? You'll still get Major Slayer, and you'll still get at least 140 weapon and spell damage if you're going to use a low-cost ulti like Crescent Sweep. So while you may be losing out on potential weapon and spell damage, you're not really losing out, tremendously so. So obviously this will depend on the fights you're doing. And that's why even if you don't like Baylord for, certain fights where you're not going to be able to have an ultimate in time or something like that, you can obviously go with the 3 alternatives I showed you. But otherwise, I don't really see a problem with this, particularly in the context of 4-man content. Now, for the second 5-piece set, we have 3-piece Mechanical Acuity on 3 of our body pieces. And we want Mechanical Acuity on 1 bar. We don't want it to be active on both bars like Master Architect is. We want it on 1 bar because we want to control its procs. For those of you who don't know how Mechanical Acuity works, when you deal direct damage, you have a 15% chance to gain, for 5 seconds, guaranteed critical strike damage. This applies to everything. This applies to your light attacks, your dots, your skills. You are guaranteed to crit on everything. And this is really important because this plays into the burst aspect of this build. And on the back bar we have Maelstrom's Inferno. Pretty typical one that you may need. If you don't have access to Maelstrom's Inferno for your back bar, or if you haven't done Maelstrom Arena yet, you can do like a 2-piece willpower as an alternative. But Divines on all pieces, guys, in terms of traits. We want Bloodthirsty on jewelry. Now, ideally for a burst build for PvE, you don't want the fight to last like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that. So essentially the closer or the faster you get to execute, the better Bloodthirsty is. That's pretty dumbed down, but that's basically what it is. And ideally you want 3 Bloodthirsty instead of like 3 infused or whatever. Because the moment something gets to execute, your beam and everything is just going to hit so much harder. And that's another tremendous addition to our burst damage for the entire fight as well. And for your front bar staff, you want Precise. Now you may be asking, well, why would you have Precise if you have Mechanical Acuity? This is basically for when Mechanical Acuity is off of cooldown. You guys got to remember that it has a 13-second cooldown in between each proc. Right? And so this is going to help off of cooldown. Otherwise, you can try it infused. It's really up to you if you want to try that, but I prefer Precise so far. And infused on the back bar for the weapon damage enchantment boost. And that's pretty much it. This is going to boost all our Shadow Mundus effects. That's crit damage. So again, a lot of burst damage packed into one little box. In terms of skills, I'm going to talk about this here and then I'll talk about the rotation. We have Purifying Light, Force Pulse, Blazing Spear, Radiant Impression, Inner Light, and Shooting Star. Ideally, for really, if you want the most out of your burst damage with this build, you want Fiery Rage, the Destro ultimate. It's a lot more ultimate, and it's a lot more burst than Shooting Star. Now, Purifying Light has been buffed this patch, and you want to let it expire. You don't want to recast it too early. Force Pulse for cleave heavy fights with bosses if they have ads, or this is really great for trash packs as well in dungeons or trials. Otherwise, if it's purely a single target fight, Elemental Weapon will win out over Force Pulse. Now, Blazing Spear is also a pretty good dot to have still as a Magplar DPS. Radiant Impression, this is your bread and butter for execute. It hits so hard. We have Inner Light to boost our max Magicka on the front bar. Some people do Entropy instead of Inner Light. It depends on the fight. And here on the back bar we have Solar Barrage. Not only is it an AoE damage over time, it's also a source of Empower, which increases the damage of our light attacks by 40%. It's pretty insane boost actually, so that's also adding to the burst damage with this build. Channeled Focus. Now I know some people have asked me, and other people who play Magplar, whether they should run Spell Symmetry or not. Realistically, Spell Symmetry is more for the dummy for a lot of people. I mean, you can still run in Reigns or dungeons, but it's a bit more riskier, especially if you're not comfortable with the group or with the content. So realistically, I'm pretty sure a lot of people, including myself, will go with Channel Focus, since it does give us Magicka Recovery in addition to Major Resolve, Major Ward. That's pretty cool. And we have Unstable Wall of Fire, still good. Vampire's Bane. The difference between Vampire's Bane and Reflective Light is Reflective Light hits 2 more additional targets, so it's better AoE, but it lasts 4 seconds less than Vampire's Bane. So in terms of rotation, Vampire's Bane is definitely a bit more comfortable with the other dot timers, like Purifying Light and Blazing Spear. And we do have Channel Acceleration. This is only for when you can't get to the boss or target and apply the Fighter's Guild skill Barb Trap, which also supplies the same thing, Minor Force. You ideally always want to have Barb Trapped over Channel Acceleration because it is a different source of damage. But again, if you're not comfortable in that fight or whatever, you can still slot Channel Acceleration. And we have Crescent Sweep. This is not only a ultimate that we want to use on occasion or for a short amount of burst damage. This is also something we need to take into consideration when we look at the Adric Spear passive Piercing Spear. Increases our crit damage by 10% with an Adric Spear ability slotted. If you notice, I have Blazing Spear slotted on the front bar, which gives me the 10% crit damage boost on my front bar, and now I need another one, but I'm not going to double slot Blazing Spear, right? That's redundant. Instead, I'm going to slot on my ultimate Crescent Sweep, which is still an Adric Spear ability, even if it's an ultimate. So that's why we have Crescent Sweep on the back bar here. And that gives us a constant critical damage boost on both bars. In terms of rotation, it goes something like this. Basically, you pop your potion, your traps down, and as the boss is coming, you go to your front bar, shard, and you don't really light attack, you don't want to proc Mechanical Acuity. You really don't want to do that, because while you're in your back bar doing dots, that's just a waste of time. So you just want to do Blazing Spear, Purifying Light if you want, and then actually I'll just show them the dummy. Or actually, I guess we don't have a dummy. But anyway, Purifying Light after Blazing Spear if you want. Wall, Barrage, and then Vampire's Bane, then swap. And by that time, you can start light attacking and LE weaponing or force pulsing. By that time, your Mechanical Acuity will have procced for the next 5 seconds. No matter what, until it's over, the duration of Mechanical Acuity is over, you just want to use your direct damage ability, whether it's LE weapon or Force Pulse. This is going to be a great amount of burst damage, as I will show you here pretty soon in this video.